What is up, guys? This is Let's Talk History, and it's hard to say that in a way because I'm so used to saying Let's Talk Politics. No, Mateo's 2020 Politics. Sorry. Um, I'm pretty sure all the subscribers in this channel are from that channel. So, um, today we're gonna be talking about the Revolutionary War, and I'm gonna be doing a large part series. So, here was the map of the world in 1764. This was shortly under the French and Indian War, which is a war in which the British fought the Native Americans, and French combined, and they beat both of them. They're such badasses. So, of course, this is England, but it was known as Great Britain at the time. Um, so, these are the 13 colonies. This is simply their territory. Of course, the yellow is all Spain. The upper parts, of course, um, they're of course Canada. And so now there was some tension going on between the 13 colonies and Great Britain. So this is how the line represents the relationship. Now, this is what represents it a few years later. Now, there were a few things that mainly happened, and I don't want to explain it here because we may not have enough time, but mainly the Stamp Act, um, higher taxes, which is pretty self-explanatory, Sugar Act, Somerset v. Stewart case, which is when um, the British actually made a court case and they actually banned slavery, and people don't actually know this, and this is one of the parts that shows you how even the Revolutionary War wasn't just good guy, bad guy. The colonists were mad that the British were um were anti-slave. So, if anything, although the Constitution and Declaration of Independence does talk about equality, England was more for equal rights than the actual Americans were, which is a pretty crazy fact. Um, and so yeah. Um, so of course, Proclamation line of 1763. What happened? Now let me teach you about the last one, Proclamation of 1763. What happened was that the British vowed to not expand on any Native American land beyond the 13 colonies. So that is the basically pink, right? And um, the lighter pink is technically their territory, but the difference is that colonies they have direct rule, although they do have their own governors. But with territory, they're technically in charge of it, but they don't actually do anything there. So they promise not to make any of that their colonies and to kind of please the Native Americans. And of course, it's got many of the colonists mad because they wanted more land. Um, so the tension was really going down in Massachusetts. And so the very first important event is on March 5th, 1770, when there were some British troops in Boston and they were here protesting and they were ordered to calm it down. Now, of course, the colonists were not happy when the British showed up. But then something wrong happened. Captain Preston's squad opened fire. This was the infamous Boston Massacre. Now, going into a bit of humor, I don't know why in the hell there is a dog in the middle of this and why he's just, I don't know, staying there. But anyway, although it does, the textbooks, and I should teach you about this, I learned this from 7th grade, the textbooks always teach you a different side of actual history. It's not as simple as them lining up and opening fire. It was more of a case that one soldiers apparently, according to historian Holger Hook, he apparently slipped on ice because there were rocks being thrown at them, and some of the colonists even had clubs, and some even had swords. And so, as the soldier slipped, Private Hugh Montgomery, as he slipped, he fired a shot by accident, which confused the rest of Captain Thomas Preston's squad. So this is much more of an accurate photo in the sense that you could see how there's a man grabbing one of the soldiers' guns, another soldier's on the floor, and you can see that a couple of the colonists actually have clubs in their hands. Another accurate one is this one, which shows the British much more cornered, and also the guns are being, the colonists are attempting to take their guns away. Some of them even have clubs. So yeah, next important event, December 16th, 1773. This is known as the Boston Tea Party, in which colonists, known in a group called Sons of Liberty, dressed up as Native Americans for some weird reason, and went on the ship and threw millions worth of tea into the ocean. Next major tension moment, May 1774. So, the current governor of Massachusetts was Governor Thomas Hutchinson, and he was elected since he was in office since 1769, so shortly after the French and Indian War. But then King George III, seeing that there was some rising tension in Massachusetts, sent over General Thomas Gage. Now, he wasn't just any general. He has a pretty important past. So he fought also as a general, although it was many years earlier, in the French and Indian War, from which for 10 years straight. And he is also present day the current general of the British forces in the 13 colonies. So if you don't know too much about military ranks, the highest level of general isn't just in charge of a certain amount of people. It becomes more based on the amount of territory. So, for example, there's only a few, as they would say back then, four-star generals during the time of British rule in the 13 colonies. And there's one in charge of India, there was one in charge of the African territory, and then there's Thomas Gage, who's in charge of the 13 colonies territory under King George III. So, he gets sent over on a ship, but he has to have a conversation with Governor Thomas Hutchinson because Hutchinson is a bit confused. Hold on. Um, General Thomas Gage, why are you here? So, of course, they get on Snapchat and they start discussing it. Hey, Governor, I'm replacing you as Governor of Massachusetts for now. Don't worry, I'm definitely not lying. So, of course, red is General Thomas Gage, which is this one. Oh, sorry, you can't feel the vibration. The guy in the red. Of course, the one with the larger wig and in darker red is Governor Thomas Hutchinson. Sure, you'll just be temporarily replacing me? Man, what a hot day. I don't like how we officials have to wear these uniforms in this heat. Yes, General, it is, and it is so annoying. Anyway, you'll be just temporarily replacing me? Is my wig messy? This always happens to me. What? You will be temporarily replacing me, right? Hey, do you want to hear a joke? Stop. 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 You keep trying to change the topic. Are you lying to me? You're lying to me, aren't you? Because you keep changing the topic. General Thomas has left the chat. So just for you to know, Thomas Hutchinson was forced to get exiled back to Great Britain, and he was told he'd just be there temporarily, but he never came back to the colonies. Ever. I'm not even kidding. Um, so now, Thomas Gage, the general of the 13 colonies, now, of course, he had direct rule over Massachusetts. He was not only the general of the 13 colonies, he's also the governor of Massachusetts, so he isn't just sitting at a desk, he's actually physically working. So he signed some laws that King George ordered him to, such as the Coercive Acts, which is that they should punish the colonists for their involvement in the Boston Tea Party, which is, of course, when they dressed up as Native Americans and threw tons of tea off of the ship. But here I have a really interesting quote from from a different general. So of course he's a lower rank than than General Gage, but he's serving under Gage and he's observing him. General Thomas Gage's great lenity and moderation served only to make the colonists more daring and insolent. General Percy to King George III. So what he's basically saying is that Gage is a bit too loose. He's kind of like that cool teacher. Um, he's a bit too loose on the colonists and lets them have groups like the Sons of Liberty because he believes in freedom of speech. So that's why Gage is a pretty interesting guy. He was pretty kind of laid back, and many other generals and members of Parliament didn't like that. So next event, September 5th, 1775. So what basically happened was throughout the year 1775, there was the Continental Congress, more specifically, the First Continental Congress, speaking, and there was a man named John Dickinson, and he sent a letter to Great Britain asking them for peace. Let's stop this rising tension. Let's be friends again. After all, we are under your control. For other colonists, sorry, although he did send the letter to King George III, he had better things to do. What are kids most addicted to? Yeah, so, but then other guys, let's say John Adams, which is the person to the right, and Samuel Adams, the person to the left, they had more actually quite different ideas. They believed in independence from Great Britain. So, you know why they were debating this? Because earlier that year, something absolutely insane happened. Okay, here it is. On April 18th, 1775, so a good few months earlier, King George III knew that there was some fishy stuff going on, and General Thomas Gage. So General Thomas Gage ordered a lieutenant colonel named Francis Smith to lead an expedition from Massachusetts up to the northwestern area of the small town named Concord, because they believed that there were some colonists smuggling weapons there. So now the next day, while they're still marching, they get stopped right in the middle in a town called Lexington, halfway through a journey. So the soldiers that were stopped were part of Major John Pitcairn's brigade, which consisted of about roughly 1 to 200 men. So, as you can see, Major John Pitcairn has the British flag, while a man named John Parker, who's a captain of the rebel soldiers, on the grass. But something happens. A shot is fired. Let's find out who it is. If you'll wait for part 2! Ha ha ha! See you guys later, and bye. This will be the first shot ever fired in the Revolutionary War.